We're here at the Imperial Business Insights lecture with Dr. Amlan Roy, Global Demographics and Pensions, Fixed Income Research, Credit Suisse. Dr. Roy is here tonight to talk about how demographics affect economic growth, asset prices and capital flows. Dr. Roy, we're delighted to have you with us tonight. I have a few questions for you. First question is, what is your background and what did you study at university and what did you do after that?
Thanks very much, Eleanor, and it's a pleasure to be here. I grew up in India, going through 9 schools, went to a very prestigious liberal arts college where I studied economics with math, finished up with an MBA from a sister school of Harvard, which is called one of the hardest business schools to get into. About 6,000 Indian engineers apply for 10 slots at the time I did it. And after that, I worked for ICF a couple of years before going to US to get my PhD, taught in US, taught at London School of Economics, University of London, and then moved to Credit Suisse in 1998. I've been there close to 15 years. And the type of research I do is very eclectic, differentiated, unique, because it's on big picture. We publish very little, very, very selectively, but we see clients across 37 to 39 countries across a wide swathe from central banks, government treasuries, macro hedge funds, private equity investors who are very short-termist to the long-term insurance companies, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and real money investors.
What's your main area of focus amongst that research at Credit Suisse?
I sit within securities research, which recently is formed from the merger of fixed income bond research and equity research. What I do is big picture research, and I'm very lucky to have the kind of role where I straddle a bunch of disciplines: macroeconomics, finance, derivatives, asset pricing, behavioral finance, and try to synthesize it into looking at a subject I've developed called global demographics and pensions. And what I highlight is how it affects the big picture of consumers and workers changing around the world, and at the heart of it is people. If people are changing as consumers and workers, that affects their consumption, that affects their savings, that affects GDP growth, that affects capital flows, that also affects what's happening in the world of pensions, that affects things such as which sectors are going to grow, which regions are going to grow. So at the heart of it is all consumers and workers.
So that's why presumably we need to pay attention to global demographics.
Yes, demographics is a widely misunderstood subject because somewhere down the line it got associated with aging. However, demographics is not about age, it's about people, and it affects 7.2 billion people today in the world because there are 7.2 billion consumers. A baby of 1 hour at Imperial Medical College is also a consumer, and somebody in Norway aged 121 is also a consumer. And a big proportion of these 7.2 billion are workers. Workers make the GDP and consumers consume the GDP.
What are the most important future demographic trends on the horizon?
The most important trends on the horizon have to do with the fact that while these trends have been there, we've never paid attention to it. And one of those trends is a growing number of old people above the age of 80. Economics and finance has misled the profession, and we as investors have also been very myopic in terms of construing the old-age population as a homogeneous mass of people above the age of 65. Yet, for an 80-year-old roughly in European countries, the government spend about 80 to 140% more than on a 65-year-old. So a 65-year-old is very different than an 80-year-old, and today with a growing mass of people, the fastest growing population segment in the world is the 80 plus. So you are most likely, and your cohort is going to live till 100. So the change that we need in society is a change we've never prepared for, never thought about, and never envisaged. How will individuals, families, schools, as well as governments and international organizations deal with a changing population where the 80-year-old is very different than the 80-year-old 5 years ago, where the 65-year-old is very different than the 65-year-old 5 years ago, and the 4-year-old playing on an iPad, an iPod, an iPhone is very different than a 4-year-old 5 years ago. And we have not come to grips with it because in finance and macroeconomics, we've made heroic assumptions on the representative agent, on perfect information, on perfect rationality. All these things have enabled us to do good mathematical models, but we've lost sight of the woods for the trees because we've started assuming that economics is a perfect science by ignoring your and my consumer psychology and worker behavior, and that has been a very big shortcoming of what we are seeing.
Excellent, thank you. Final question is, do you have any tips for students who might be interested in going into this field?
This is a very niche area, so all I would like to highlight is if you want to develop an area which is important in research, you need to be open to understand what is the world doing around you, be comfortable to research it and challenge the common mores and traditions. I have been very fortunate because as an academic, I got to teach derivatives, international economics, finance, portfolio theory, read very broadly, taught very broadly, so I was able to synthesize it. Now I try to pass it on to my younger colleagues, but the beauty of the subject and the discipline is that it is something which affects every country, every society, and no country has reached a stage where they really understand these issues. Finance and investment societies are way behind consumer companies in understanding these. So I give a message to the biggest trillion-dollar fund managers, CEOs, CIOs, as well as the biggest consultants, that we need to do a lot more to understand the heterogeneity of consumers and the consumer psychology and the worker behavior, just the way that a Nestle or a Procter & Gamble or a Unilever does.
Dr. Amlan Roy, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. It's been a pleasure.